What I want to share with you today is not just philosophy, but a prediction, a warning that stretches across centuries. Friedrich Nietzsche once said that he was describing the history of the next 200 years, the rise of nihilism, something he believed was already inevitable. He saw Europe, and indeed the modern world, rushing restlessly toward a crisis, like a river that no longer pauses to reflect, but only races toward its end. Nietzsche gave us one of the clearest diagnoses of nihilism, not just as an abstract concept, but as a living force shaping Western culture. Now, nihilism takes different forms. Epistemological nihilism, the belief that truth and knowledge are impossible. Cosmic nihilism, the idea that the universe is cold, hostile, or indifferent to human beings. Moral nihilism, the rejection of any objective, right or wrong. But Nietzsche's main concern was existential nihilism, the haunting suspicion that life itself has no inherent meaning, no ultimate purpose, no built-in value. What we value matters. Nietzsche was careful to point out that humans are always in the act of valuing. To live without value at all would barely be recognizable as a human life. But the problem isn't simply that we value, it's what we value. If our highest values no longer inspire or guide us, we end up with a hollow life. Nihilism, then, is not just believing in nothing, it's being unable to see meaning in the things that matter most. He described nihilism as the radical rejection of meaning, value, and desirability, forms of nihilism. Throughout Nietzsche's works, we see different faces of nihilism. 1. Nihilism as despair. This is closely tied to Schopenhauer and Buddhism. Schopenhauer argued that suffering far outweighs pleasure in this world. Existence is mostly pain, boredom, and fleeting escapes. From this perspective, it would have been better never to be born at all. Buddhism, likewise, views worldly existence as a cycle of endless dissatisfaction, something to detach from. But Nietzsche thought this attitude was life-denying. For him, the answer wasn't to abandon life, but to remain faithful to the earth. 2. Nihilism as disorientation. Nietzsche critiques Christianity. Christianity isn't nihilistic in the sense of despair. After all, it promises eternal salvation and the bliss of heaven. But it relocates meaning away from this world and into another one. Nietzsche's famous parable of the madman captures this shift. He asks, what happens when we unchain the earth from the sun? Where are we going, if not endlessly, into the void? God is dead, and we have killed him. This was not a celebration, but a seismic recognition. The central source of meaning in Western life, God, had collapsed under the weight of science, rationality, and historical awareness. The Christian worldview that gave life direction was dissolving, leaving us disoriented. 3. Nihilism as mediocrity, the last man. Nietzsche also warned of another type, the last man. This is the person who no longer aspires to anything higher. He is comfortable, conformist, and content with shallow pleasures. He blinks at the very mention of greatness, saying, "We have invented happiness." To Nietzsche, this was the most dangerous form of nihilism, not despair, not disorientation, but the quiet suffocation of higher values under mediocrity and comfort. The crisis of values. Why is nihilism inevitable? Nietzsche thought it was the natural outcome of Western values themselves. Christianity and Enlightenment morality placed the highest emphasis on truth. But that very commitment to truth eventually exposed the illusions of religion and metaphysics. In destroying those illusions, we were left with nothing. He wrote that nihilism is what happens when our highest values devalue themselves, when the goal and the why of life are lost. Humanity then faces a terrifying question. If there is no God, no higher order, no ultimate purpose, what now? The ascetic ideal Nietzsche also examined how people historically tried to cope with meaninglessness. One answer was the ascetic ideal, renouncing worldly pleasures in favor of poverty, chastity, humility. This gave suffering a purpose. It was not meaningless, it was a path to another world. But Nietzsche saw this as another form of nihilism, a will to nothingness, an attempt to escape life rather than affirm it. He didn't dismiss it entirely. After all, any meaning is better than none. But he believed it poisoned life by making this world a mere stepping stone to another. Overcoming nihilism. Nietzsche's entire philosophy revolves around one theme: life affirmation. He didn't want to stay trapped in nihilism. He wanted to go through it, overcome it, and come out stronger on the other side. This is where his most famous ideas come in. The Übermensch, overman, the human being who creates new values, who shapes meaning for himself instead of relying on old crumbling ones. The will to power, not domination over others, but mastery over oneself, a striving for growth, strength, and creativity. Eternal recurrence, the challenge to live as though you would joyfully relive your life exactly as it is for eternity. To accept eternal recurrence is to say yes to life in its entirety, even its suffering. Nietzsche called this Amor, Fati, the love of one's fate, active versus passive nihilism. In The Will to Power, Nietzsche distinguished between passive nihilism and active nihilism. Passive nihilism resigns itself, seeking comfort in conformity, religion, or escapism. Active nihilism is destructive, but in a creative sense. It tears down false idols to make room for new, life-affirming values. Nietzsche himself was not a nihilist. He was a physician, diagnosing the illness of nihilism and urging us to overcome it. His philosophizing with a hammer was not about smashing recklessly, but about tapping to see which idols rang hollow. Why it matters today, the danger of nihilism didn't vanish in Nietzsche's time. In the 20th century, the loss of shared meaning led to mass movements, totalitarianism, and wars that scarred humanity. In our own time, it often takes the form of consumerism, entertainment, and shallow distractions, the very world of the last man. But Nietzsche believed there was a way out, through strength, creativity, and the courage to affirm life without illusions, to remain faithful to the earth, to embrace our struggles as part of what makes us grow. As the poet Rilke, inspired by Nietzsche, once wrote, "Only when we make the abyss our dwelling place will paradise return to us, and the angels will sing again in praise of the earth." Closing nihilism is not the end, but a challenge, a call to create, to affirm, to live more deeply. Nietzsche asks us, can we become strong enough to live without illusions and yet still say yes to life? That is the task. That is the path toward the Übermensch. Thank you for listening. If you found this valuable, support the channel by liking, sharing, or subscribing. And let's keep this conversation about philosophy alive.